It's a Therapy Thursday here on Good Things Utah, and Cassidy Duhadway is a licensed therapist and owner of Purple Sky Counseling. She is joining us for our monthly session.
And Cassidy, we are talking about trauma, but before we jump in further, you've given us this definition of trauma, which I want to share. So trauma is the result from exposure to an incident or series of incidents that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening, affecting physical, mental, social, emotional, and even spiritual health and well-being. Okay, thank you for that definition.
Absolutely.
And what else do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so trauma's kind of just become this go-to keyword everywhere, and really trauma is so much more nuanced than the way we talk about it on social media, right? Trauma is actually about how you and your nervous system respond to an experience that you're in. So it's not about what happened to you, it's about how your system was able to tolerate it or deal with it, right? And that changes over your development too. So if you're 2 and you experience something, that's different than what I can tolerate as a 25-year-old.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And there are different types of trauma.
There are.
Some are prolonged, some are one incident.
Yep, single incident trauma, prolonged trauma, complex trauma, betrayal trauma, religious trauma, like all kinds of things can show up as trauma for an individual.
And you talked about the nervous system, and I think this is
Yes.
such an interesting aspect of trauma, because personally, I had a couple things happen in my adult life that triggered the trauma and really feels like put my nervous system out of whack. Can we repair that?
Absolutely. And the nervous system, doing a lot of your somatic and nervous system work is one of the key foundations to actually helping with trauma. But you said something really interesting. Over our lifetime, we experience wounds or trauma. And at any point, those wounds can be ruptured at any age, depending on what's going on. So as you learn how to manage and regulate your nervous system, right, paying attention to your body, listening to your body, using your coping skills, recovering, having emotions, then you're able to handle and get through each of those potential future ruptures, as well as heal the trauma that you might be carrying with and dealing with right
Okay,
now.
let me ask you this. How many of us have dealt with trauma? If you have people watching right now saying, not me, this doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, so the research is interesting. Before COVID, the research said 70% of Americans have experienced a traumatic incident, and 20%, I think it was 20% develop PTSD. That's one specific kind of trauma. That's not complex trauma. That's not attachment trauma or childhood trauma. That's a very specific type of trauma that we've been able to research. And as we learn more about trauma and we understand trauma more, those numbers are becoming more expansive.
Wow, and listen to all the different names of traumas you just said. So this is so nuanced. Nisha, you said something really interesting in the break. You said, what happens if you don't address the trauma and you think, I'm tough, I'll power through?
Yeah, it actually, you get sick, you get heart disease, you have blood issues, you can have an autoimmune disease, you can have migraines. You actually have a physiological response to trauma, and it shows up more and more as you get older in life.
I think that's fascinating. Like it impacts your physical health,
Absolutely.
not just your mental health.
Absolutely.
That
The first thing you do when you go and have a heart problem is they say, how's your stress load?
Really?
Right? And so if you're carrying trauma and stress load over time, that impacts your body. You cannot disconnect your head, heart, and mind. They always work together. And we get know that when we set up our health system, right? And so we have to go back and work from this community care and this really holistic viewpoint of it. It's not just working with a therapist to deal with trauma, but it's how do we move in the right safe enough support? How do we make sure you have food and shelter and all the things you need and do the trauma work?
Yeah, and trauma can happen to anyone. No
Anyone.
one is immune. So what
No
do we
one.
do about it? Let's talk about the different modalities.
Yeah, so at Purple Sky Counseling, we specialize in trauma. And there's some really, really cool techniques that have come out. There's somatic trauma, there's acceptance and resolution therapy, there's EMDR, there's neurobiofeedback, there's the research around ketamine and trauma right now. And we have a couple of those in office, which is what we use. My favorite is EMDR, and I am lucky enough I get to actually train other therapists in Salt Lake on EMDR. So all of my therapists are highly skilled in that modality, which is awesome.
I've tried
Yeah.
EMDR. I know you have too.
Yeah.
No, and I think it's so interesting. Do you, if people say, I've got it, I don't need to work on it, are we doing better with talking about mental health and seeking treatment and trying things like EMDR in 2023?
Yes and no. It's a therapist answer, right? We're doing a lot better at seeking help for our children. We're starting to do better at seeking help for ourselves if we're between the ages of 30 and 50. And we're really struggling to seek help if we're 45 plus.
What about men?
Men are actually, they're starting to do more in seeking help, and they're still not asking or wanting to get help. They don't want to be seen as like, there's something wrong with me, there's something, I'm weak, right? And really, truly, when it comes down to it, your biology has nothing to do with your strength or your weakness. How we interpret things is actually, it happens at a subconscious level regardless of your gender, right? And when we teach men, don't cry, that actually leads to trauma symptoms, right? So if we say don't cry, they learn how to put their emotions away and to be strong. And that is a huge symptom and lead up to it being a traumatic experience because they have to cut off a part of self.
That was such an incredible explanation, the way you just said that. And also, I think we're still a quick fix society. So,
30 days, I can have this solved, right?
Right, but try maybe the different modalities, see what works for you. Where do we find Purple Sky Counseling?
Yeah, so we are in Murray and in Hebert and online, and we do online and in-person trauma work. We offer EMDR, neurobiofeedback, and we're always bringing in new things as well. So we do our best to do what we can for everybody.
Information right there on your screen, everybody. Check out their website and also them on social media. There's Facebook and Instagram right there. Thank you so much. You're making me happy with all your color today on the show. We'll be back with more GTU after the break.